You will not believe what this police officer said under oath, until Judge Judy shut him down in seconds with one sentence that left the courtroom gasping. In today's video, we uncover a shocking courtroom moment where a decorated cop thought he could outsmart the toughest judge on television, but forgot her eyes missed nothing from twisting the truth to trying to bully a young witness. This case spiraled fast. Stay until the very end, because this is one of the most intense hidden cases in Judge Judy's secret files. And we promise the final twist will leave you speechless. The cop walks in with confidence, but Judge Judy sees right through him. The courtroom was silent as the bailiff opened the door and announced the next case. Judge Judy was already seated at her bench. Her gavel rested near her right hand. Her expression was unreadable as she scanned the file in front of her. The plaintiff was a young woman named Rachel Moore. She walked to the podium with steady steps and a serious face. Her curly black hair was tied back. She wore a modest navy blouse and black slacks. She clutched a folder filled with printed photos and documents. Behind her stood her attorney, a calm and sharp-looking man in his 30s named David Carter. The defendant was Officer Brian Thompson, a tall white man in uniform with slick-back blonde hair and a confident smile that did not reach his eyes. He marched into the courtroom like he owned the place. He saluted the judge and stood at the opposite podium, his hands clasped behind his back like he was still on patrol. Judge Judy did not return his smile. She stared straight at him and then down at the file again. Her voice was brisk and clear. "All right. This is a civil suit filed by Rachel Moore against Officer Brian Thompson for alleged misconduct during a routine traffic stop." Rachel spoke first. "Your Honor, I am suing for the emotional damage and public humiliation caused by this officer lying on his report and detaining me unlawfully." Officer Thompson scoffed, but Judge Judy raised her hand slightly, and he fell silent and, "Go on, young lady, speak clearly." Rachel explained that she had been pulled over for a broken taillight while driving home from work. The traffic stop took place on a quiet suburban street just 3 blocks from her apartment. She said the officer accused her of being drunk despite passing the breathalyzer test. He then claimed she resisted arrest, even though she had video showing her hands on the steering wheel the entire time. She described how the officer pushed her against the car and handcuffed her in front of neighbors who came outside to watch. David, her attorney, held up a large printed photo showing Rachel in cuffs with Officer Thompson holding her by the arm. He said this image was taken by a neighbor and time-stamped. It shows Rachel fully cooperative with her hands clearly visible. Judge Judy looked at the photo, then back at Officer Thompson. "Did you write in your report that she was resisting arrest?" "Yes, Judge, I did." "Was she yelling, cursing, fighting you?" "No, Judge, but she was not complying." Judge Judy squinted. What does not complying mean if she was sitting still with her hands up? The officer hesitated. "She was looking at me with attitude." The courtroom shifted. A few people in the back gasped. Judge Judy sat back in her chair and folded her arms. "So she was looking at you with attitude?" "Yes." "So not speaking, not moving, not shouting, not attacking you, just giving you a look?" "Yes, Judge, it." She leaned forward. "And that, to you, is resisting arrest." He cleared his throat. "I believe she was about to escalate." Judge Judy turned to Rachel. "What happened next?" Rachel described how she was taken to the precinct, but released 2 hours later, with no charges filed. No ticket for the taillight, she added, no citation, no apology. Judge Judy asked Rachel why she waited 4 months to file a lawsuit. Rachel explained she was scared. She said she worked at a local school and was worried the arrest would hurt her job even though no charges stuck. It took her months to get the body cam footage, which mysteriously started halfway through the stop. David added the footage starts after Rachel was cuffed. It is missing the part where she was pulled over. Judge Judy nodded slowly. "Officer Thompson, let us hear your side from the beginning." The officer straightened his back and began to speak. Judge, I was on routine patrol when I noticed the tail light was broken. I initiated the stop for public safety. I approached the car and smelled what I believed was alcohol. Did you say alcohol? Yes, Judge. Did she blow into the breathalyzer? Yes. What was the result? 0.00. So no alcohol? Correct. Then what made you cuff her? He shifted again. She hesitated when I asked for her license. Rachel shouted from her podium. I reached for my purse like you said, and you shouted, "Stop moving." Judge Judy held up her hand. I will decide who speaks when continue, officer. He said I feared for my safety based on her movements, and the neighborhood is known for aggression against officers. Judge Judy stared for a moment. Which neighborhood was this? He replied, Elmhurst Street between Avenue D and 3rd. Judge Judy looked at the file, then looked up again. That neighborhood has no record of police ambushes or officer assaults in the last 10 years. He paused. Well, I thought. No, you guessed. Yes, Judge. She tapped her pen on the bench. Do you know how serious it is to put resisting arrest on a civilian record that can cost someone job scholarships or even housing? He nodded. I did what I believed was necessary. Judge Judy leaned closer. You thought a black woman giving you a dirty look meant you were under threat. Did you ever stop to consider that she was scared? He did not reply. Judge Judy turned to Rachel. Did he ever read you your rights? Rachel shook her head. Never. The courtroom stirred again. People whispered. One woman in the gallery put a hand over her mouth. Judge Judy picked up the body cam transcript. She read a few lines out loud. Suspect is not cooperative. Subject is showing aggression. Subject is potentially intoxicated. She put the paper down. None of this happened. The footage shows a quiet traffic stop, followed by sudden yelling from the officer. Officer Thompson tried to explain. I needed to assert control. Control over what a teacher in her own neighborhood, who committed no crime. Rachel wiped her eyes. Judge Judy sighed, then looked at the bailiff. Bring me that internal review from the precinct. The bailiff walked over with a sealed file. Judge Judy opened it, scanned a few pages, and raised an eyebrow. Well, this is interesting. She looked back at the officer. Were you disciplined for a similar incident 2 years ago? His jaw clenched. Yes, Judge. Was that complaint also about unnecessary force and false reporting? He nodded. And was the plaintiff also a woman of color? He nodded again. Judge Judy closed the file and leaned back in her chair. Then I already know how this is going to end. The truth unfolds as Judge Judy shatters officer's defense. The courtroom was silent, save for the sound of Judge Judy flipping through papers. The tension was palpable, as everyone could feel that the case was about to take an unexpected turn. Officer Thompson stood there, trying to maintain his composure, but it was clear the walls were closing in around him. Judge Judy had just revealed the internal review from the precinct, where Thompson had been disciplined before for similar complaints. She didn't speak for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she glanced between the file and the officer before. You know, she began, her voice calm but sharp. This isn't the first time you've been accused of mishandling a situation like this. The officer's face turned red as he shifted nervously. Yes, Your Honor, he muttered. Did you learn anything from that review? Judge Judy asked, leaning forward. The officer cleared his throat before answering, Yes, Your Honor. I was given additional training. Training, huh? Judge Judy repeated, her gaze icy. I wonder if that training taught you to lie under oath and manipulate evidence. Thompson flinched at her words, but he remained silent. You're telling me that on this occasion, Judge Judy continued, you felt threatened by a woman who was doing nothing but sitting in her car, a woman who had already complied with your request to pull over and was fully cooperative when you approached her. The officer remained quiet, his jaw tightening. Answer me, Judge Judy demanded. Yes, Officer Thompson replied, his voice low. Judge Judy sat back in her chair, shaking her head. Let me get this straight, she said, her voice growing louder. You've been a cop long enough to know that a look doesn't justify putting your hands on someone, and it sure as hell doesn't justify writing up false claims in your report. But you did it anyway, didn't you? Thompson didn't answer, and Judge Judy pressed on. Do you even realize the damage you've caused here? You put a completely innocent woman through an ordeal that never should have happened, and now you're standing here trying to justify your actions. Rachel stood quietly at her podium, trying to keep her emotions in check. The last few minutes had been a whirlwind, and she felt a mix of relief and disbelief. The man who had unjustly arrested her was now being exposed for what he was, a liar and a bully. David, her attorney, stepped forward, looking directly at Officer Thompson. Officer, your story doesn't add up, David said, his tone firm. You've made accusations that are simply not supported by the evidence. We have the body cam footage, the photographs, and the witness statements. Your report is nothing more than a poorly written attempt to cover up your misconduct. Thompson opened his mouth to protest, but Judge Judy silenced him with a sharp gesture. Don't you dare try to talk your way out of this, she snapped. We've heard enough from you. Now, let me tell you something. She paused, her eyes locking with his. You've been caught in your own lies, and you're about to face the consequences. The courtroom was on edge. Rachel's breath caught in her chest. Could it really be happening? Was Officer Thompson about to be held accountable for his actions? Judge Judy picked up the file and placed it down in front of her with a loud thud. You lied to this court. You lied to an innocent woman. And now you're going to pay the price, she said, her voice echoing in the room. The officer swallowed hard, his face pale. He knew the game was over. Officer Thompson, Judge Judy continued, her tone unwavering. I am issuing a ruling today that will ensure you never work in law enforcement again. Your badge is revoked effective immediately, and you will face an internal investigation. Rachel let out a quiet sigh of relief, her hands shaking slightly. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where she could finally feel like justice had been served. But Judge Judy wasn't done. Furthermore, she added, I'm sending a clear message to every officer in this country. Abuse of power will not be tolerated. Your badge doesn't give you the right to abuse, manipulate, or mistreat civilians. This case will go down in the history books as a reminder of what happens when you think you can get away. David nodded in approval, while Rachel allowed herself to smile for the first time since the arrest. The weight that had been hanging over her was starting to lift. But the story didn't end there. Now, Officer Thompson, Judge Judy said, standing up from her bench, before you leave my courtroom, I want to make one thing crystal clear. You may have thought you could get away with this, but today you've learned that even the most powerful don't escape justice when it's served correctly. The officer stood frozen, unable to speak. His gaze flickered nervously between the judge and the courtroom. Take your things and leave, Judge Judy ordered. You're dismissed. And remember, the truth always comes out in the end. As Officer Thompson turned and walked out of the courtroom, the gallery erupted into applause. Rachel stood tall, a look of triumph on her face. This was more than just a victory for her. It was a victory for every person who had ever been mistreated by someone in power, for every person who had ever been lied to and left to suffer. Judge Judy had done it again. She had shattered a lie, exposed a corrupt officer, and made sure justice was served. The final judgment, justice served. The aftermath unfolds. The courtroom had barely settled after the applause when Judge Judy's voice rang out once again. Let's make one thing clear, she said, her tone firm. This isn't just about one officer's mistake. This is about the system that allows people like him to think they can get away with anything. Today, we send a message. We say no more. Her words reverberated through the room, filling the space with a sense of finality. Rachel, her heart still racing, exchanged a glance with David. They had been through so much, and now it felt like everything was finally falling into place. Judge Judy took a moment to collect herself before continuing. I don't want anyone leaving this room thinking this case was a one-time event. The lies, the cover-ups, they're part of a much bigger problem, and we're going to make sure this problem doesn't go unnoticed anymore. David stepped forward, his voice filled with gratitude and respect. Your Honor, thank you for seeing the truth and standing up for what's right, he said. The justice that was served today means more than we could ever express. Rachel, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, nodded in agreement. She had never expected such an outcome, especially not after everything she'd gone through. What happens now? Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Judge Judy's gaze softened slightly as she turned to her. No. Now, Ms. Moore, she said with a gentle but unwavering tone, you get your life back, and you make sure everyone knows that you stood up for yourself and for what was right. You make sure the world knows that this case, the one that never made it to video, was not going to be swept under. The finality in Judge Judy's words left no room for doubt. The case, despite the officer's best efforts to bury it, was now a part of the legal record, a case that would go down in history as an example of truth prevailing over lies. As Rachel and David prepared to leave the courtroom, they were approached by a reporter. Ms. Moore, the reporter asked, how do you feel now that Officer Thompson has been stripped of his badge and dismissed from the force? Rachel paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. I feel like justice has finally been served, she said, her voice strong. I'm just glad that the truth is out and that I didn't let him get away with it. Her words were powerful, and they resonated with everyone who had been following the case. Rachel had become a symbol of courage, standing up not only for herself, but for anyone who had been mistreated by those who were supposed to protect and serve. Meanwhile, Officer Thompson had been escorted from the courtroom in silence. His world had come crashing down in a matter of hours. His career was over, and the lie he had tried to cover up had been exposed for all to see. The damage was done, and there was no going back. In the aftermath of the case, the precinct launched an internal investigation into Officer Thompson's actions. It didn't take long for other officers to come forward with their own stories of misconduct and negligence. It became clear that this was not an isolated incident, and soon a wave of accountability began to sweep through the department. Rachel, despite the personal victory she had just experienced, knew this was only the beginning. The case that never made it to video had sparked a movement. It had opened eyes to the corruption that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. The attention that Judge Judy had brought to the case would continue to inspire change long after the courtroom doors had closed. As for Judge Judy, she returned to her chambers, already preparing for the next case. Her work wasn't over. She was more determined than ever to fight for justice, to keep the courtroom a place where truth could rise above lies, no matter how hard someone tried to bury it. The case that never made it to video had been revealed. The truth had come out, and in the end, it was Judge Judy's unwavering pursuit of justice that made all the difference.